start the recording now. That would be great.
Starting now, and I'm muting all, so you just unmute yourself.
Thank you. And I'll hand over to Sarah.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lisa. Well, a very, very warm welcome to our first webinar of 2019 around our Building Digital Capability Service. We're really delighted so many of you could join us today. As you just heard, Mark is recording the session, so we will be able to record the link of the session and share that after the webinar. And we'll also be able to share with you the slides which are in SlideShare. So hopefully those will be valuable resources as well for you to return to. And thank you, Claire, who's just popped in the link to the slides in the chat window. So today I'm going to just do a very short introduction, and then I'm mainly handing over to my team. And the slide that you'll see shortly has the full Building Digital Capability team. So if we have a look at the next slide, we'll be able to just see that. Also, just to say, this is the first time that we as a team are using Zoom for our webinar. Those of you that have been with us previously know that we used to use a platform called Collaborate. So any feedback that you have on your Zoom experience, do share that with us, because that would be really useful for us to know for future webinars as well. But we hope it's a good experience for you from your side as well. So a very warm welcome from the team. As you can see, we have a good representation of the team with us today, and you'll be hearing more from Lisa, from Heather, and from Shri on the various different aspects of today's webinar. But also importantly to also introduce some of the faces perhaps behind the scenes that you're not always aware of. But Jack is our Client Support Officer, and he is first port of call if you have any queries and any questions. So Jack's very much been supporting us with all the getting you all on board, making sure you have all the necessary information, documentation, and also monitors our sort of inbox in terms of project support. Our support requests on a daily basis as well. Alicia is also working very closely with the teams that are supporting our service website, and also is about to start a new area of work, which some of you have already contributed to, along with Heather Price, on digital wellbeing. So keep an eye on that one as well. Claire is our content curation manager, and is the person behind the scenes who's actually writing all the content, a lot of the guidance that we have on our service website. But also many of you have been in touch with her recently around some of the case studies that we're gathering around institutional developments on digital capability, and of course the use of the discovery tool as well. So if we look at the aims for today's webinar, and that slide should appear in a couple of seconds. And Lisa, if we could move on to the next slide. I think we're on a bit of a go slow here.
Sarah, yes, sorry, no, it just seems to be going a little slow. I shall keep on at it.
Thank you. The purpose of today's webinar is very much about introducing you obviously to the team, but also to introduce you, more importantly, to the work that's been going on behind the scenes around the data dashboards. And in a moment, Heather will be showing you a lot more detailed information, which is all available through the excellent guidance materials that we have, but for making sense of the data that you are now able to visualize. We will also have an update from Heather just on where we are in terms of our release around digital badges and resource edition. Lisa will be sharing a further update around the service and exciting developments in relation to our next community practice event, and just some of the operational side of things in relation to keeping in touch with you. Shri is going to give us an update on our partnership working, and in addition to the work that Shri has been doing in supporting our FE skills providers that we are working with, Shri has also been leading some very interesting work in terms of some of the partnerships that we've been developing around digital capability, and importantly the outcomes of those. And then we've got time for some open discussion in relation to some of the areas we would like your feedback on. So if we move on to the next screen.
Can I just check, Sarah? Mark, I don't know
Yeah.
if I've actually got controls at the moment. My slide.
No, it's saying you're saying you are. Shall I just try and take control and see what
Yes,
happens?
please.
Yeah?
Thank you.
Right. Okay, let's try.
Always works seamlessly, doesn't it? And all the sort of run-ups that we've been doing today. So
Yes, best laid plans.
Yeah. So I'm controlling the screen now, but nothing yet.
They were zipping through for us earlier.
they will indeed.
Yeah. Trying again. No, it's not wanting to move. So I don't think it makes a difference, me or you.
So while we work out the technical challenges that we're currently having, can I ask you to put in the chat window the key one thing you would like to take away from today's webinar, if it's in relation to sort of updates around the data dashboards, if it's just more of an understanding around the service and what we're offering, what support you can get. It'd be really, really useful just to have your feedback in the chat window around the areas that you would like to see sort of covered. Thank you for starting us off there.
Lisa, it's not moving through. Do you want to take back control again and see? It might be the best one.
Great.
Oh, it's moved.
Great. So that sort of leads us in quite nicely there, because we were planning a poll, but what we are able to do, if you do want to add your comments into the chat window or use the A, B, C or D in terms of looking through that. So great to see those ideas coming through. Super. Great. And I think one of the things that we are very keen to ensure is that we are able to sort of work with you on this journey and looking very much at how we can support you with making most use of the service and of course the discovery tools. So hopefully after today's webinar that will also be quite clear in terms of what we can support you with and where some of the areas of expertise you can draw and lie. And importantly, I think as well, drawing on the community practice. Great, thank you. And
Sarah, sorry, very quickly, I can hear some noise in the background, so I'm going to unmute and mute everyone again. So just if you can unmute yourself then, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, muting all now.
Great, so it should only now be my microphone that is actually on, so hopefully there won't be any more background noises. So if we are able to move on to the next slide. Thank you, Lisa. That seems to be working now, which is great. Just a reminder of what the Digital Capability Service offers. And in addition to perhaps what the focus of this webinar is about in terms of the discovery tool, there is a wealth of information and guidance that's contained in the background in relation to the models for developing a digitally capable organisation, in relation to the starting point for all of this, in relation to the framework and the profiles, and Lisa's got some very exciting news around those later on in the webinar, but also the access to the community of practice in terms of sharing what's working. And I know some of the calls we've been having, you know, there's a wealth of knowledge there in terms of what institutions are already doing in developing their digitally capable organisations and links that they can share and strategies that they can share. So part of our remit as well is to sort of share that best practice through case studies, but also through networking opportunities as well. And importantly, that sort of yellow blob there is the bit that we're calling working with you. So looking at particular areas that you may want support on and particular interventions that you may require support on that we may be able to come in and work with you on. So, you know, that's sort of giving that sort of more holistic view of the service as well. So if we move on to the next slide, which I'm hoping will move on as quickly as the previous one did. We should be able to just see a few sort of pointers for the discussion areas. And thank you, Claire, for responding to some of those questions that are coming up in the chat. It is just reminding where the source of guidance is, and I know Lisa will be sort of talking through that in a bit more detail. and looking at how the tool is being used for students. So that, I know we've got some good examples. I know Hull, for example, with Paul, you're planning your use of the tool with students, and we know that Nottingham are already using the tool very successfully with their students. So we can start to sort of draw that out in the discussion. But before I hand over to Heather, just a few prompts that I'd like you to think about in terms of the areas that you would like further discussion around. Those, just have those thoughts in the back of your mind when we start moving through the webinar today, and to look at which of those areas we can pick up on towards the end of the webinar to get some further thoughts on. As you'll see, and as has been the case with the way that we have been developing all our work around building digital capability, we very much want to do this in partnership with you. And of course, the needs that you have and the requirements that you have really do drive the direction of what we're doing. So it's really important that you're able to give us your views, and for us as a community to look at how we sort of prioritise the areas of support and further developments going forward. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Heather. I'll pause there just in case we have got any questions. If there are any questions, please do pop them in the chat window and just preface them by a Q so that we know that those are specific questions. Doesn't look as if we have got any at the moment, but I'll keep monitoring the chat.
Sarah, do you want to unmute in case anyone wants to ask any questions?
Yes.
Okay. I've unmuted now, so is there any questions out there at all? No.
Okay, well in that case,
Unmute again, yeah.
Thank you, Mark. I'll hand over to Heather.
So Heather, just need to unmute yourself again.
I'm unmuted, thanks, Mark. Lisa, am I going to assume that you'll move the slides in case we have the problem where they stop moving?
Yes, I'm happy to, Heather, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, if you want to move on to the next slide. So what I'm hoping to do over the next few minutes is give you a brief overview of the Discovery Tool dashboard, but also provide an introduction to the visualization feature as sort of like the main focus of what I'll be covering. We have had some questions about the dashboard, and I know that I think more recently Sarah and Lisa and Sri have perhaps, when they've had calls with some of you, they've gone into more detail, but I know others have had some queries. So I'll just start off with an introduction to the dashboard. What I also want to try and highlight is sort of like the navigation guide to the visualization report content that you can see. Some of the questions that I've had already indicates that I think sometimes it's not as intuitive when you're going through it. So I just want to highlight where the information is there, and also provide you an opportunity at the end to ask any questions that you've got. If you do have some as I'm going through, do put them in the chat box. If it makes sense for me to respond to them straight away, then I will. But if not, what I might do is just look at them at the end when I get to the end and respond to them then. But I'll see how it goes. The link that I've got on that slide there just takes you through to the Discovery Tool Data Visualization Reports Guide, which should have been shared with all of you that have access to the data visualizations. And very much is what I've drawn on for most of the presentation. So really any questions that you've got, I hope should be answered by that as well if they come to you after the end of this presentation. So Discovery Tool dashboard, this is the view that all staff can see, and it's pretty similar for students, apart from they don't have a question bank, which I will touch on in a minute, and instead, because there's only 2 question sets that they can access, they are on the main dashboard. But because for staff there are a number of question sets, we've put the main generic exploring your overall digital capabilities question set on the main dashboard, and all the others are accessible from the menu on the left, which I will touch on. I just want to mention, hopefully you can see the green tick on the explore your overall digital capabilities. That shows that this user has completed that question set. If there's a sort of partial green line near the top of that box, that means that that person is part way through completing that question set. So if you could move it on for me, Lisa. So just to highlight, I'm just going down the left-hand menu. So the it hopefully is in the same order for you. All of these icons will be there, but not always necessarily in the same order, because I've taken this from one of my admin views, so I know sometimes I have a slightly different view. But in my view, the first icon I can see is the resource bank, and that gives you access to all of the resources that have been identified by our colleague Lou McGill, who's been working very hard on the content side. Much of the content that is within the resource bank is also available from within the reports that you get at the end of a question set, but not all of them are there. So the most comprehensive listing of the resources that we have are in the resource bank. So it's a very useful thing to go and have a look at. If you want to go to the next slide, thanks. So the next icon is the question set bank, and again you can see there's a couple of green ticks which indicate that 2 of those question sets have been completed by this user, and this is where all of the question sets that are available to a member of staff will be. It's very tiny, but you can just see with the very final question set there's a partially filled green line at the top. It is very tiny, but that means that question set is partially completed. So I just hope that helps you have an understanding of the meaning of the icons that are on there. If you can click again. So this is a guide to using the discovery tool, which I think is quite useful to those who are just starting to use the tool, and you might want to point your staff or students to that. There's a guide in all versions of the discovery tool. Next is the report. So this is where a user has completed reports. This gives them the opportunity to either view the report or retake it. Just as a reminder, and that a warning will come up, but when you retake a question set, it will wipe out, as soon as you start that process, it will wipe out all of your previous responses, and your previous report will not be there until you won't get a report until you've completed the question set. So if you would like to sort of keep copies, or staff or students want to keep copies, they need to view the report and then download it. So within the view report screen, there's an opportunity to download that, so you can download those reports and then retake them. And finally, we have the icon, which is the main bit that I'll be talking about today, is where you access your data visualization reports. So all of you who have access and can see that icon in their dashboard will have been sent a passcode to use. So the previous slide we just saw, that's where you enter your code. And once you've done that, it still stays on that welcome page, and to view the different sets of information, there's various tabs across the top, and I've just labelled them here to make it clearer. So the first tab that you can see provides access to the staff data visualizations. The middle tab provides access to the staff and student grid question responses, and finally the furthest tab on the right provides your access to the student data visualizations. So it depends what it is you're interested in and what you want to look at, which tab you select. You move to the next slide for me. Thanks, Lisa. So just an overview, what kind of information do you get in your visualizations? In both the staff and student, you'll have information around the number of completions for your staff and students. For staff, that is by department, and for students, that's by subject discipline. You'll also have information on the total number of completions for all of the question sets that have been completed by your staff or students. And you'll also have the number of responses per question set in those views. You'll also get digital capability scoring bands, and this is by organisation, subject discipline, and just for staff only by department too. I will say a little bit more about these scoring bands later on in the presentation. And you'll also have sector comparisons for these scoring bands, so you'll be able to compare or have a look at your results as compared to the sector that you're in. The grid response tab provides information on the percentage responses for each of the statements within the grid questions as your staff and students go through there. So that can give you an insight into the most and least popular choices that your staff and students make, and may provide some interesting information in terms of perhaps support you may want to look at. If you move to the next tab form, thanks. I just want to say a little bit about the terminology by department and by subject discipline, because I know this has been raised with my colleagues when they've been talking to some of you. So within the visualisation reports, where we talk about information by department and by subject discipline, this data is based on the fixed drop-down options that your staff or students selected when they signed up to the discovery tool. If you want to see what those options are, you will have completed them yourself when you signed up, but if you need a reminder, you can find information on those in the staff and student sign-up guide and the full listing of what they are in there. They are fixed headings, and it's to enable this cross comparison, so it is standard across all those that sign up to the discovery tool. Just to say, in order to see those guides, you do need to be logged into the site to see, but there's information on how to do that on that slide. So once you're in your data visualization, it's worth knowing that your data will usually default to responses provided to the overall digital capabilities question set, so that's what it will default to, and it will also default to the entire data period that is available for your organisation. You can change those bits of data, so you can change the question set by clicking on the drop-down list, and you can change the survey start date, so you can look at just a particular month. Just bear in mind, like we are at the moment, if we're the data's partway through a month where it says January, that will show up to the 15th, but it will be very clear on your report what you're looking at. So as you can see in the box in the middle there, it says select a date range 20th of September to the 15th of January. If you move on to the next set, please. Thanks. I'm not expecting you to be able to see all of this. This is just to give you a sense of the kind of information that's contained in staff and student data visualizations, and I'm going to look at each of those sections separately, but this slide just gives you an indication where you can find the various bits of information that you're looking for. For the staff version, it is possible to toggle between by department and subject discipline view, but I will mention that later on as well. Okay, if you want to move on to the next slide. So just looking at it more detail, so when you're looking at the top part of your report, it gives you the number of completions by department for staff, and this example is for staff, but this information will be by subject discipline for students by the date period that you're looking at. So if you want to have a look and see the completions within February compared to March, you can do that, or you can just look at your entire data period. Okay, and then when we're looking at your staff and students responses by question set, again, this is near the top of your report on the right hand side, and this gives you information on the completed question sets and those that are in progress. So those question sets where a staff or student member has started a question set. Now it could be that they have started it and they have got partway through and then they need to do other stuff and they're going to come back to it. It may be that they've started it and then decided just not to complete it. That is something you'd need to have conversations with your staff and students about if you are concerned about the number of those in progress or that doesn't seem to change. So in terms of the total staff and student completions, that's found just below the box that I just shared in your data visualization. Now this provides the total number of staff or students who've completed or started at least one question set in the discovery tool during the date period that you're looking at. Now this number may well be smaller than the total number of question sets completed, and that's because it's asking the question, how many staff have completed question sets. It's not asking how many question sets have completed. So some staff may have completed more than one question set. So that total there is actually how many staff, not how many question sets. Okay. So digital capability scoring bands. Now this information for students is shown by subject, but for staff you can view this either by department or by subject. Now staff will only have any information by subject if they have identified as either a teaching member of staff or a research member of staff, and that's because only those users are asked a follow-up question when they sign up in terms of what subject area are they either teaching or researching. So you won't get that information for your finance admin staff, you won't get that for estate staff. So just to be aware, that's where the subject data comes from. So depending on what spread across your organisation staff are using it, there may be a smaller subset, unless it's all tutors that are completing the question sets in your institution. So the numbers in each of the coloured bars represent the actual numbers of staff that have completed those question sets. If you want to look at percentage wise, as I've got demonstrated here, you just hover over and it gives you that information. And the slide that we're looking at here, or we were looking at, sorry Lisa, you're doing so well, that we were looking at. So that's looking at the sector digital capability scoring bands rather than your organisation. So if you do want to move on to the next one, Lisa. So, and that finally near the bottom of your visualisation, you'll get to see a mapping across the organisation and sector digital capability scoring band. So that's looking at the overall scoring for the main digital capability elements that are within the question set that you're looking at. So that will look slightly different depending on the question set that you're looking at. The one we're looking at there is for the overall digital capabilities question set. If you're viewing that for your library question set or for the teaching question set, there's a slightly smaller number of capability areas that are looked at. So I just want to say something about the grid question responses. I just want to mention that there's a number of filter options which is very important to be looking at when you're viewing these this visualization. So make sure that you've selected a single question set rather than all, because it will get extremely confusing and messy if you select all. The option is there to do that, but it isn't really a helpful view. Some of the filters are only applicable to particular question set types. So this example, which is probably difficult for you to see, but because we're looking at the explore your overall digital capabilities, the level of study is not an applicable filter, because that only relates to student question sets, because they have provided that information when they signed up. And department is only applicable to staff question sets, because students don't select a department when they sign up to the tool. When you are, oh sorry, can you just go back a second for me? Yeah, so just final note, when you are downloading your question sets, you'll need to change the digital capability area filter, but I will pick up on that later, but it's just because I'm talking about filters, I just want to mention that there. Okay, thanks. Navigating the grid question responses isn't as straightforward as the other visualizations, because they can be very long reports. So just to be aware that when you are moving down the grid responses, if you feel you're sort of stuck and you should be able to go further, just check that you are as far down as you can be on each of the 3 navigation bars which I've just highlighted there. Also really important to be aware of is downloading grid question response data. You will need to use the digital capability area filter, because only so much of the view will be captured. I've put full guidance on how to do this in the Discovery Tool Data Visualizations Guide. So for example, for the particularly for the student grid question responses and the overall digital capability responses, you'll need to section that up about 3 times. But if you do have any difficulties after you've looked at the guidance, do get in touch with me. But I find that works well. Otherwise, the way in which the download works is that it only downloads what it can physically see. Thanks, Lisa. So, as I've touched on downloading your data, you can download your data in 2 different formats, as a PDF or as an image. The download feature is at the bottom right of the page of any of the pages that you're viewing, and it will download the version of the report that you can see on the screen. So if you want to download data for different question sets or different time periods, you need to make sure you alter that at the top of your visualization, as I mentioned earlier on in this presentation. And just again to highlight, remember that the grid question response data needs to be downloaded in sections, so you can, if you want to get all of that downloaded. So when you're in your data visualizations, if you want to log out of that, you simply, you just click on any icon in the left-hand menu. So probably easiest to click on the home button, but to be honest, if you click on any of the icons in the left-hand menu, that will log you out. And if you go back to the data visualization button, you'll need to click on that again in order to get back into the question set, the data visualizations. So in terms of report update frequency, this takes place twice a month. Once at the beginning of the month, that covers the end of the previous month, and once just after the middle of the month, which takes us up to the 15th of any month. So you can expect the updated information to appear probably around the 18th of the month to give you between the 1st and the 15th, and probably around the 2nd or 3rd of the following month to give you the full month up to the 30th or the 31st of the previous month. Just a quick word in terms of who can view your institutional data visualization. So only staff who have the data icon on their dashboard can view the data visualizations. They will also need to have a password to do that, but without the data icon, a member of staff won't be able to view the visualizations. If there are staff in your organisation that you'd like to have access to your data dashboards that don't currently, please drop an email to the project mailbox and ask for this. But access can only be provided to users who have already registered with the Discovery tool. So please check with that member of staff before you put in the request that they have actually registered to use the Discovery tool, because we can't add on an icon to a dashboard that doesn't exist. Okay. We are in the process of updating some guidance that was put together for the pilot version of this tool around how to make use of your data. Within the guidance document that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, there is a link to this original guidance, because I still think it's a useful starting point, and we are going to be building on that, so it won't be completely rewriting the information that's in there. So there's things like how you can use the information around the number of staff completions to explore engagement with the Discovery tool. You can look at the scoring band data to look at the various levels of confidence in terms of developing capable and proficient, though we would say use that information with caution. You must consider the relative importance of the different digital capability elements across the different roles or the types of students that you have. So, for example, it may well be that in a particular department or team or subject discipline, there is a high level of developing in a particular digital capability area, but that may be absolutely fine. That might be the appropriate level for that role or level. So we must be clear in saying that the goal shouldn't necessarily be, and certainly shouldn't be for all areas, that making everything should be proficient. It's all about what is appropriate and relevant to the roles in there. So it's not about staff or students trying to become proficient in every area, unless that's what they want and that's what they aspire to, or whether or not that is what would be very important for that particular role. And finally, within that guide, it mentions that the data in there is useful for starting conversation with various teams within your organisation. So it could be with staff development teams, it might be with IT and e-learning teams, it could be with budget holders or teaching staff and their representatives. So there's some information in the guide that we currently have that looks at that. At the moment, it doesn't touch on the kind of information that might be useful coming out of the grid question responses. And I think there is an awful lot in there that would be useful. And that's certainly an area we're looking to incorporate into that guidance when it's re-released and updated. Okay. So I have seen there's been quite a few questions. I've seen them coming in, but I haven't looked at them fully. So I'm going to have a quick look through there. If any of my colleagues have answered questions, do jump in.
Heather, do you want me to unmute as well in case anyone wants to ask you questions?
Can I look at the questions first,
Yeah,
so I can try and
sure.
answer those, and then yes, I think yes, it would be useful to unmute. So I'm just scrolling up to the beginning of where I was talking. Let's go down. So I did notice that there were questions about expanding the data export. We are looking at that. Doing that will create, at the moment when it says exporting the data, it doesn't export in the way in which you would expect. It's probably worth knowing that the tool that we're using here is Tableau, and I have experimented exporting the data. It will cause quite a lot of additional support requests. We can see that, and until we know that we have the capacity to deal with that, we're not turning that on. But we are looking at it, and if we can find sustainable ways of doing that, then that's certainly something that we're looking at. But at the moment, this is why the export is contained to PDF and image. So that's one of those questions. So, right, I was just sharing some useful information on how they worked with their unit. So for example, say Phil said that he used a workshop approach with their school to unpick the digital capability framework and got them to identify the areas that were most relevant. So when they completed the discovery tool, they weren't so concerned, I'm not going to use the word upset, with being low on digital creation. Yeah, so I think that it's really important that staff and students do not feel that there's a need to be anything more than developing in some areas. Okay. Yes, actually, Mark, if you could open the mic, so if there are any other questions that people have, I'd be very happy to hear them. Particularly if I've missed out any that were in the chat box when I've scrolled through that you thought was in there and I haven't answered. So,
any questions out there, people?
I'm going to assume not. But as I say, always open to hear any questions that on reflection, if somebody has questions later on, then
Sure. Okay, then I'll mute again, Heather. So
yeah,
just
and I'll unmute myself. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Right. If you move on to the yes, thanks, Lisa. And I did say this is one of the questions that people wanted answering earlier on when Sarah asked her questions. What were you hoping to get out of today's session? So this is just a brief update. In terms of resource addition, I think we are reasonably close to making this live. There are still some user experience niggles that we need to iron out first. So we have seen, myself and some colleagues, we have seen the development view of the ability for you to add your resources. There's just some things that I know need to be updated so that it's ready to be made available to you. We also need to put some reasonably comprehensive guidance to go with that. So in addition to actually getting the feature up and running, the guidance needs to be put together once those final tweaks have been made. Just like my guidance on using the data visualizations, that heavily relies on screenshots. And so until we have the actual screens as they should be, that guidance can't be completed. So we are looking to launch this during next month, but you're likely to be looking towards the middle to latter half of next month for that to be available. In terms of the digital badges, again, we're very close, and I'm hoping that will be nearer the earlier part of next month rather than the later part next month. And the way in which the digital badges work is that when a user gets to the end of a question set, they have their feedback report, and at the very end of the feedback report, they will have the ability to claim their digital badge that says, I have completed this question set. We're using Credly, so what will happen is they will provide their name and email address where they want the digital badge information to be sent to, and that will be emailed to users, and then they can claim that. So they should be able to have those within 14 days of completing the question set. And unless there's any questions about either of those things, I'm having a look. No, I don't think there is. Oh, can these badges work with VLEs? I don't know the answer to that question, Non. They're managed by Credly, so whether or not Credly have that as an option, I'm not sure. I can perhaps speak to my colleague who is the expert in digital badges in Jisc, and I'll ask that question, and I'll come back to you and let you know. Okay, are there any other questions for me at all?
Do you want to do unmute one more time?
Yeah, you can do. And just to say, noting your comment there, Non, yes, some people love badges and some don't, and it's absolutely optional. So people aren't forced badges. It is definitely opt-in to have the badges rather than. I think that was really important when we were looking.
Okay, I'm going to do a mute all again there. It's getting a bit noisy. Okay.
All right, well, thanks everybody. As I say, any questions at any point, just drop me a line and I'll happily help.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Heather. So just to finish off, I just wanted to share a couple of updates around the wider service, and then I'm going to pass over to Shri to make a couple of mentions as well about some partnership developments. Now, we've been having these conversations with many of you, and I'll mention them in a moment in our initial calls. But I just thought it'd be useful in a sort of wider context just to flag a couple of key parts of the new service website that you might find useful. So all of our resources have now moved over to our new service website, and hopefully you're finding that a much easier place to find all of the frameworks, the profiles and case studies, additional resources that we have. And you can get that, you've all seen the link, and hopefully you'd had a little explore. Just to mention, once you log into the website as a subscriber, you get access to some additional information. And once you select on development pathways, hopefully you can see that listed in the top right-hand corner there. You'll get 3 options, and that's to focus and some of our resources down onto particular audience groups. And I would suggest that if you have a look at the Developing Others pathway, that's the place where you may well find most things of interest. So I'll just run through a couple of key sections to that. If you select the Discovery Tool option within Developing Others, that's where all of the guidance is sitting around the use of the Discovery Tool. So there's a section called Discovery Tool Unpacked. That's where you can find all the PDFs of all the question sets. Obviously, as a member of staff, you can't see the student question sets, so you can download the PDFs of all question sets from within there. But there's also a lot more background about question design, description of all the question elements within the tool, and also further information about the resource process and the resources within the tool and the whole selection process around that. Planning for implementation. that's really the sort of starting point. I know we've been having a lot of conversations with many of you about sort of tips for engaging staff and students, and this is a good place to start, along with the engaging others section. So in planning for implementation, you can find overall guidance on ensuring the tool sits within the sort of bigger picture of your organisational goals and structures and processes, but it includes some practical tips, including a pro forma of questions to get you started, some guidance around stakeholder engagement, planning for evaluation, sort of key things that we've been talking about over the last year or so through the lessons from the pilot. The engaging others section, that includes some posters that we've produced which might support you with communication with your staff and students. They're currently in the process of being updated, but you can still edit and tweak what there is there. There's just some a code that relates to the previous pilot, which we'll be taking off, rebranding, pointing to the new URLs, and we'll let you know as soon as they're available. Heather's already mentioned there's a making sense of your data section where you can find the guidance around the reports that Heather's talked about, and you'll also be able to get the updated guidance on making sense of that data as well. But there's also some FAQs. We're trying to capture some of the more frequently asked questions as they come through, and a glossary that Lou, our content editor, developed just to sort of give that summary of all of the terms and wordings in the discovery tool itself. So that's one of the sort of key places where you might find something useful. The other area is around the strategic steps model, and where the discovery tool implementation guidance starts from the position of the discovery tool and viewing that in the context of that wider picture. This is really focused on that bigger picture. So it breaks down the journey around organisational digital capability into 4 sections, but gives you some really practical actions and resources at each of those stages in the journey. And again, there's some really practical pieces of useful material in there, such as the audit tool, which you might want to use at the beginning stages of your journey, just as a prompt for a series of questions around where you're at. And then maybe further on in the journey, we've got some guidance for HR teams. That's something that's been coming up a number of times in the conversations that we've been having around the importance of engaging HR in the process. And we did a study around that, which unpicks the various different HR functions and around where digital capability has a place to play. So that's the website. Again, any queries on any of that, do let us know. And I also just wanted to mention where we were at in terms of ongoing support. So at the moment, we've had initial conversations with many of you. We'll be getting in touch with everybody to arrange that. But if you haven't yet been in touch to suggest a good time and some dates for us, please do that, and we will follow that up. And the overall aim is that broadly every 6 months we will have a conversation. And the initial calls are really just for us to better understand your context, discuss where you are in terms of your planning, identify support needs. And they're really important just for us to get that sort of baseline information about where your starting points are, so that we can return to that conversation and see how well the service is meeting your needs as we go forwards. And the evaluation process is really critical in this, in terms of feeding the conversations that are feeding into that, but also the evaluation forms that we have in the discovery tool can also feed into the conversation. So what we will also be doing is, just before the next review calls, is sharing with you an organisational feedback form, just so that we can capture from your perspective as organisations how well the service is meeting your requirements. The other thing that's been coming through in the conversations is the importance of us capturing any priorities and requirements for you for the service going forwards. So I'm capturing these, and we'll be discussing those in terms of a prioritisation discussion. But if there's anything that occurs to you as you're going through, do just drop us an email to the project mailing list, and we'll make sure that all gets fed in. Finally, I wanted to mention just a couple of key events coming up in the next few months. So we have our big DigiFest conference, which is taking place in Birmingham at the ICC on the 12th, 13th of March. We will be running a workshop around digital capability and having a number of sessions that will explore that theme. So please do put that in your diaries if you're able to join us. And importantly, our next community of practice. We're looking at either the 14th or 15th of May at the moment. We will be able to confirm venue hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But just a reminder that you do, all as subscribers, have 2 priority places to those events. So we'll be in touch when the registration form is out, and please do come and join us. And we always ask for contributions to those events. And in the discussion at the end of this session, it'd be really great to hear from you, or please put them in the text chat. Any ideas that you have for things you would like to see at those community events. So we tend to have a sort of fairly standard format. We have 2 keynote speakers which come and bring a different perspective on digital capability in, and we also have a Pechakucha presentations from you in the community as that opportunity to share where you're at with your practices. But if there's anything specific you'd like to see or any topics you'd like to see covered, please do let us know, and we'll feed that into the planning. And finally, just to mention the Change Agent Network Conference. Again, one of the common themes from the calls we've been having around student-staff partnerships and how critical that can be as a way of engaging staff and students in the process. So the CAN conference is happening on the 29th and 30th of May at the Open University, and I've just shared a link there to where you can find out more about that. Do we have any questions around any of that, or I shall pass on to Shri just to finish off before we come back to the main discussion.
Do you want to unmute the microphones? And
yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Unmuted. Any questions out there? No. Okay, I'll mute again.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Mark. Shri, are you with us?
I'm speaking.
I can hear you, yeah.
You can. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. So yes, just a little update on some partnerships that we're working on. So I think those of you, well, you're all subscribers to the service, and so you know that you can use the framework to kind of provide a shared vocabulary within your organisation at both individual and organisational level. But another quite powerful way to use the framework is actually to link up, to build a bridge with work that other people are doing. So some of you might have seen that the Education and Training Foundation have recently developed this new framework. It's called Digital Teaching Professional Framework for FE and Skills. And it forms the basis of a new platform that they're developing called Enhance, which is going to have a range of micro-learning modules built on top of it. So what they've done throughout, while they were developing the framework and the platform, is they've mapped their categories back to our digital capabilities framework. So what this means in practice is that you can complete the discovery tool and then get really, and then go to the ETF platform and get very specific guidance on which bits of microlearning are particularly relevant to you. And kind of in return, what we've done is we've updated our FE and skills teaching profile to echo these mappings, if you like. And so hopefully that will provide a really good joined up service for the sector. And another partnership that's blossoming at the moment is a growing partnership with Microsoft. So some of you will have seen this resource that they developed last year, which gives you kind of guided pathways depending on role, so student, researcher, academic, administrator, and it gives you links directly to capabilities that at different levels. They call it bronze, silver and gold, because that's what they're using at Milton Keynes, the college that helped to develop this resource, along with the University of Leicester. So again, this is an example where you can use the discovery tool to reflect on and identify the areas that are important to you, and then get direct links to appropriate Microsoft resources very quickly. So what we're doing next on this one is updating this, because as you can imagine, there's a number of new resources out from Microsoft, and they've also in the process of launching their Microsoft Education Transformation Framework. So that's another place where we've been able to map both ways with the discovery tool, and we're planning to update this resource in light of these developments. And then just very quickly, it's probably worth mentioning a couple of other areas that we're working in. So LinkedIn Learning actually mapped their content to our framework some time ago, and we've got that at the moment as a flat document, and I think we've shared it with those of you who are interested or who are using these resources. So if you're planning to use LinkedIn Learning and you'd like to be put in touch with others who are doing the same, then let me know or put something in the chat. That would be great. And a new piece of work that we're just starting out on, which I'm quite excited about, is mapping the Google Applied Digital Skills content to our work. So I think what we're seeing is that we've got a kind of methodology now which is quite well established, which can be kind of rolled out to anyone really who's created a large resource collection. So I guess my question to you is this useful to you personally as an organisation? Are there other collections that we should be looking at? And if you have any thoughts generally. Thank you.
Sri, do you want me to unmute?
Yes, please. Oh, I see a question there from Non saying you'd be very interested in the LinkedIn Linda content. Yes, certainly, Non. I think...
I'm just going to mute again. Sorry again, it's a bit noisy out there.
Certainly, we've got... I think 3 universities and 1 college at the moment who are actively looking to link those up. So I'd be very happy to put you all in touch. The researcher, so when we did the role profiles originally, they were done in conjunction with various professional organisations. I don't know whether we've mapped specifically to the research and development framework.
Yes.
Sarah,
just to add to that, we're currently reviewing all of our frameworks, and where there have been sort of changes made, we've gone back to the professional bodies. For the researcher profile, we worked with VTI and did the mapping through to their framework. We are in the process of revisiting that work with our Jisc research team, and we will be potentially looking at sort of a collaborative piece of work around research and also research professionals, and looking at developing and updating both our research profile, but also putting forward a new profile for research professionals. Lisa, I don't know if you want to say anything further around that, because you've been heavily involved with that.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, I didn't mention earlier. So we are currently in the process of reviewing all of our profiles. The one that has the most changes is the library and information professional profile, just because of the work that we've done to develop the question set for library learning resources staff. So that's in the process of, we're just working with SILIP at the moment in terms of getting their approval of some of the changes that we've made. So they'll be coming online shortly. The profile that Sarah referred to that is also coming up new is for research support staff, and that we're liaising with our research support team on that. So they're probably the 2 biggest developments, but we will be doing a bit of a refresh of all of the profile and the framework documentation just to reflect all of the new URLs and the new resources that we have. So again, we'll let you all know when they've been updated.
I think, Lisa, we were hopefully looking at having a research professional profile at least ready in draft to consult in March, weren't we?
Yes, yeah.
So in terms of the other collaborations on role profiles, SILIP for our library and professional information professionals profile, ALT for our learning technology profile, VTI for our research profile, and what was the Higher Education Academy but Advanced HE for their HE teacher profile, which is mapped to the UK PSF. And as Sri mentioned, we've also now mapped our FE teacher profile through to the ETF professional framework. So we are trying to sort of maintain those really important links with all the professional bodies. Yes, just to mention IDEA, the other collaborative partnership that we're working on, and although we have linked all our linked to the bronze resources within our discovery tool. Those of you that have been following developments there know that they released their silver badges in just before Christmas. So there are more resources there that we hope to add in. But more importantly as well, looking at how we can do a mapping through to their experience badge, so that if your students or staff have completed their question sets in the discovery tool, that there is some points that they can get towards their idea badges. And that's, again, quite an exciting development we're looking forward to working on.
Okay, thanks, Sarah, and thanks, everyone. So just aware of time, I'm sure many of you will start to need to leave us. We just wanted to leave you with these discussion prompts, really. We're really keen to make sure moving forwards that you're getting the support that you need from us, but also from the community. So in the calls, we're trying to make the connections, for you. But if there are other things that you would like us to be doing to enable those conversations, we'd be really keen to hear it. Particularly whether these webinars are useful to you, and if so, whether you would like to see a series of them, maybe around particular topics, and if so, what they might be. I've already mentioned our community of practice, and we have that opportunity again to share experiences and practices of what's happening across the sector. I think we've been picking up on the calls that there is a real appetite for sharing examples of what other institutions are doing, particularly around approaches to staff and student engagement, and approaches to implementation that is embedded across an organisational context. So again, if there are particular topics, or if you would be interested in seeing maybe a shared space being set up so that you can start to share some of the snippets of what you're doing for others to learn from, we'd be really keen to hear that. And our final priorities around just really about better understanding your priorities for the service and where it goes. As I said, we're already starting to capture those requirements. But for example, even around the tool, do you want to see more question sets? Would you like to see more role focus question sets, as we've sort of been doing currently? We've also been discussing the opportunities for some topic-based question sets, for example, around particular agendas, such as the accessibility agenda that is currently being discussed everywhere. So your thoughts on all of these things would be welcome. Please pop any thoughts into the chat. If you'd like to say a few words about any of your thoughts, please do as well. We'd be really keen to hear them. So I'll open out to the floor.
Lisa, I hope you don't mind my just noting there in the questions, it says that a shared space would be useful. Can I just mention our blog, and that we'd love some guest blog posts if you'd like. We've had some recently. But if you'd like to kind of talk and discuss that, that's a potential space.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, just picking up on Non about CMALT, the mapping that we've done, Non, for the learning technologist profile was mapped to the CMALT requirements. So if you do have a look at that role profile, you will see there that there is sort of a mapping and correlation there.
And just to pick up generally, we do have the service mailing list now. So if you're interested in contacting each other's, we'd very much welcome for you to use that list to do so. So if you have any questions around what people are doing, and people are happy to share through that forum, that's one space. And I think we'll have an action to go away and think about whether there's another way of enabling the sharing of practices across the community. That's been really helpful. Okay, so if there's no final comments that anyone would like to make, I kind of see there's been some really useful suggestions in the chat there. We'll bring this webinar to a close. Thank you ever so much for everyone taking the time to join us today, and hopefully this will be just one of a start of a series moving forwards to share news updates and have the conversations. So thanks very much, everyone.